also have firebombing from the anti-vax groups.
All right, well, if that's the case, and by the way, your cameras, at the moment, you still seem to be a whirling circle to not only me, but also on Blog TV, so I don't know whether you want to turn your camera on and off again to see whether that helps. But we'll bring in our first caller. I say the first caller, he's the only one at the moment, so if you want to join us on YouTube. And I say, if you want to join us, unfortunately that link above the video box doesn't appear to be working at the moment. We're trying to sort that out. Otherwise, just find us on Skype, send a contact request, and include some gist of what you'd like to ask. Hi, Gary, how are you?
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you very well.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, I thought for Mother's Day I would sort of broach the subject of motherhood, the experiment.
Is it Mother's Day? Oh no, I forgot the part.
Yeah,
Seriously?
I'm pretty sure.
You suck.
So I thought I'd just bring up the subject of this idea that life, without God, the fact is we're stuck with unintelligent design. All right, there's no creative purpose, no agenda. I describe it as gladiator wars. 4 billion years of little DNA molecules fighting with each other. The swords come out, the big sharp teeth, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. The whole thing is basically a slaughterhouse. And let's see. All right, I'm sorry. So what is the experiment that mothers conduct? They basically say, okay, I'm going to thrust a consciousness into this thing. All right. Now, if I went to the EPA and said, this is what my plan is, all right, I'd have to have an environmental impact statement. I'd have to explain what I attempt to prove or accomplish. I'd have to come to some standard and say, this is going to actually accomplish something. And my argument is all this anti-religion stuff is just fine to get rid of the gay bigotry and the other social nastiness of the religious suppression. But if you're just going to replace it with another fairy tale, I mean, you call it the Magic Sandwich Show, you could call it the Voodoo Economics Show, or you could call it the False Hope Show, or the I'm going to pretend I'm not going to die show, or I'm going to pretend I'm super attractive and marvelous show. I mean, humans are full of delusions, not only the God delusion, but the whole life purpose, Santa Claus, Merry Christmas, I love you, Mom delusion. I mean, their delusions are everywhere. And everybody, in my opinion, seems to be running from a truth that is, we are part of an unintelligent design that has basically created a carnage slaughterhouse. And you all seem fine with that. I mean, Aaron Ross...
I think we've discussed this before, I think, Gary, and I think your view was that it's almost irresponsible to have children. Is that an accurate...
Well, actually, I think it's in most cases criminal. I don't even think they give it a moment's thought. I don't think they think about what they're going to do if the kid comes out broken. I don't think they're going to think about their kid's actually going to die someday and how they're going to die. I don't think they think about divorces. And
Gary, why do you eat when you might choke to death horribly doing it?
What do I eat?
No, why do you bother eating when you might choke to death horribly while doing it?
Yeah, sorry. I might something horribly while doing it. I'm sorry.
No, what you were saying, I think I'll come back to that point if I may in a second. But just continuing with what I was addressing with you, Gary, if I may. I think this is something that I raised with you before when we were discussing this. That in a way you're right, and I think that it is. There is a lack of responsibility on many people who are bringing people into the world. I mean, an inability to look after them and having to rely on charity or state donations is just one example. But you're talking much more generally. And I think that I can see where you're coming from with that, because in a way life is purposeless. But the problem is, isn't it, we are simply creatures of DNA, and it's built into the DNA to reproduce. And so I think that's the hurdle that has to be overcome.
But it's not. It's built into the DNA to have sex, okay? DNA's been gaming us, right? It fooled us because...
What's the purpose of having sex?
Well, I'm not talking about the purpose. I'm not talking about the end game. I'm talking about what our biology demands, okay? We get hungry and we get horny. We don't get horny to have kids. We get horny to have sex. Okay, because that takes care of the kid thing automatically. I mean, salmon don't swim upstream because they are thinking, I'm going to make a bunch of baby fish. That's not what they're thinking, okay? They're hungry to get upstream. They're not hungry to have kids. No animal procreates on purpose, and certainly we don't procreate on purpose in the sense that our biology doesn't say make babies. It says do the process that will cause babies. All right?
Yes, I follow that. I'm going to go to Thunder, but just remind people if you would like to comment on this topic or any other, send a contact request through Skype to Magic Sandwich Show and we'll get you on. Thunder?
Well, fine, okay. So, what do you think the actual purpose of life is? Why do you do anything?
Well, what I'm doing is arguing for a minimization of the suffering. I value suffering. I say conscious animals, any sentient experienced suffering has value. That's the creator of value.
Okay, I fundamentally disagree with you about the purpose of life.
Yeah, I that's what I'm sort of pointing out, is that, yes, you're an atheist, I'm an atheist, and we fundamentally disagree on what life is, okay? Yeah, I think the only value in the universe is sentience. Feeling organisms create value. There is no value till one exists.
No, I mean, if you really wanted to actually sort of express it, it's a minimization on free energy parameter space. But in common parlance, yeah, okay. You might say that in the short term, the first order approximation is that people procreate because that's what they're good at. But also in that same parameter space, people discover things because that is a more favorable point on parameter space than not knowing how the universe functions. So in many ways, the actual thermodynamic purpose of life is to actually discover the purpose, is to actually create an adequate model of the universe.
Well, I'm all for an adequate model. My point is the model is basically a replicating DNA molecule completely out of control. It's like a universal forest fire or something. It's not a positive event. It's kind of
no, but that's the minimization, right? There is a selective pressure on that, and the selective pressure is the gene sequences that are capable of most accurately modeling reality are the ones that survive the best, correct?
I'm not going to argue about genetic philosophy. I don't believe genetic philosophy exists.
This is
Well, can I finish one sentence? All right, I don't believe that philosophy is at all genetic. I don't think our intelligence, in terms of its actual physical structure, the logic and the information, has anything to do with genetics. It's called philosophy. It's not a biological function. It's a function of a thinking machine that biology gave us, okay? We run software programs that are made out of vocabulary and language. All right, that is our intelligence. The structure, the computer, is sort of irrelevant to what we can think. We can think anything. Our biology does not own us. Our logic can own us.
Concordance, I think you wanted to make a point, and then we'll go to Owen.
Well, I think Gary started making the point I was going to make, which is we are not just our biology. And in the same way that, you know, a colony is not just a bunch of ants. There's an emergent behavior. When we transition from simplistic behaviors to complex behaviors, there's a whole new level of meaning. And, you know, viewed strictly from a reductionist biological sense, we are vehicles for our genes, and that's specifically what Gary's talking about. We are reproducing machines to propagate certain combinations of genes that travel together. But we can also write out our genes. We can also benefit from this as the vehicle. We get to see a lot of cool things along the way. I'm not quite clear on whether Gary is actually views like this obliquely, or if this is leading up to some additional argument, but there's a lot more to it than just the biology. When you strip it down and you pull all the neurons out of your brain, you won't find joy or happiness or art or whatever in any of those neurons. It's the action of them together. It's our social behaviors. It's our complex, higher order behaviors that emerge from the simpler biological aspects. Yeah, your genes have only one goal in mind, and that is to propagate themselves. We, on the most basic animal reductionist level, only have the goal of passing on our particular genetic markers. But on a much higher level, a behavior emerges from those simple behaviors
that is all of art and literature and society and culture and helping each other and all those wonderful things that are worth living and dying for.
Well, you
Gary,
see,
do you want to come back on that before we go to Aaron?
yeah, just quickly. Yeah, I don't think they're that wonderful. Actually, I think they're most of it's just psychological babble and nonsense. It's just we're hungry. We manufacture our potato chip. We chase it in our little wheel, and we think we accomplish something. And we just redundantly do this accomplishment thing over and over and over, chasing an ego gratification that is pretty superficial and meaningless. So, yeah, and if you want to say am I bleak, yeah, I'm as bleak as you won't find a bleaker human being on this planet, because I think it's a zero-sum game, and I think life has been a preposterous fail. It's preposterously wasted the most valuable commodity. Can I just finish? The most valuable commodity in the fucking universe. Sorry, didn't mean to say that. Okay, that's all. I just need 6 more words. Thank you.
Go on, Gary, finish your comment, and then we're going to go to Aaron, and I'll come back to you, Thunder. Gary, finish what you were trying to say.
Well, I was just the 6 more words. It's the most valuable thing in the universe, and an unintelligent design has squandered it preposterously because it doesn't have a brain, and it doesn't know suffering matters. But suffering does matter.
Okay, Aaron.
In many of the conversations that I've had ever since I was a little kid over the whole purpose of life thing, the meaning of life, I always seem to have an empty question. It's like, you know, how when they read the tea leaf, I know I've said this many times on the show, you know, the gypsies read the tea leaf, all they do is spill the tea leaf on the floor and sit down and try to figure out what they mean. But life is pretty much the way Gary describes it. It's just kind of spilled on the floor. It's incidental. It's an occurrence. There's obviously no intent or purpose or plan behind it. It wasn't for any grand design. There's no ultimate goal in mind. And so the idea of saying what is the meaning of life is a meaningless question. There obviously isn't a meaning of life. And then where we get into philosophy is only how well you deal with that reality that there is no meaning of life. Now, what he's talking about you know, the pointless pursuits that we follow to find meaning in our lives, however trivial or substantial they may be, that's all we've got. And one of the things about Buddhism, you know, when you're chasing down other religions and how they deal with this, I mean, the Buddhists have what would seem to be, by description, a very negative view of life in general, and yet their attitudes seem to be very positive. They are looking at things in much the way Gary is, and just coping with that emptiness.
Because they had to.
And so I'm going to take Gary next.
Yeah, well,
So
I'm done.
the Buddhists had to accept it because they had absolutely no control over anything. They didn't even have penicillin. I mean, Buddha had nothing. He had no way to fight nature, so he had to acquiesce to nature. Okay, but obviously they did basically recognize this is a slaughterhouse. This is insane. And they did religionize fire, and it was still a religion. It wasn't just a philosophy. But the point is I would argue that this is the job of philosophers, isn't just to be a pawn or be a bishop or be a knight or be a king. The job of philosophers is to understand the entire chessboard and understand you don't live your life just to be happy. You have to live your life in the context of the game you're playing in. You can't dump dioxin in somebody else's yard. You can't rape women. You can't do a lot of things because you are stealing too much value from the world for your gratification. We all can understand that that's what a philosopher does. He understands basic ethical equations and he draws those up. I'm saying the basic ethical equation, if we look at it, is there's no rescue mission here for the human race. It can accomplish absolutely nothing, and it's a high-risk game, a very high-risk game. There's huge liability. Can I just finish it? Can I just finish it really quickly? So just imagine us, the human race, okay, as a fire engine running down the road at 100 miles an hour, and it's taking a risk of doing all kinds of damage. It's doing it very sloppily, and there's no fire. There's no damsel in distress. There's no rape to prevent. Okay, it's a high risk. So if I build a nuclear plant under those conditions, you would say, what are you doing? You're not producing anything. Why are you exposing us to potential radiation? That would be my argument. Is that there?
And this is what I wanted to ask you about, because and even when you finish your comment, I'm still not following it. What do you mean by it's a high risk game?
Well, the risk is the suffering. We all know that a million people this year will commit suicide. A million, okay, we don't even want to go into the numbers of people who have Alzheimer's disease, will have all kinds of other things that might make them say, I regret ever being born. Jack Kevorkian said it. Mark Twain said it. We can go down the list of human beings who have made the statement, I'd rather not have been. Because I've seen too much, it's too ugly, it's too messy, it's too sloppy. We got a bunch of people laying, if there was a bird out there that existed that laid eggs on dog dew, or laid eggs on branch, never built a nest, never did anything to provide for a future or guarantee a future, but just recklessly laid eggs wherever the heck it wanted to, okay, we would call it stupid. We would call that one jerky bird.
Well, we don't call the cuckoo that, and that's...
Well, the cuckoo is even more malicious, so that's even more like a human being, okay?
What's
You
your
steal
solution
somebody
then?
else's labor. My solution is just that this is a conversation that the human race needs to go back to having. They started having it 2,000 years ago, and the Christians and the religious nuts took over the philosophical conversation, and we stopped talking about the meaning of life. We stopped talking as Buddha did. We stopped talking like all the great Greek philosophers did about what exactly are we caught up in. And now we have all this evidence. We have evolution, we have DNA, we have all this understanding of how the universe functions, and now we have the evidence to actually make the argument that, guess what? This is insanely stupid. We just have a bunch of organisms chasing an ego gratification. It's a fake hunger for a fake cheese. We're running a wheel at a very high risk of creating preposterous amounts of suffering, and you will gain absolutely nothing. There's no point in making one of these. Why would you make one? Would you want to? Would you think it would be ethical to implant life on Mars, or to implant life on Pluto, or to implant life on Saturn?
I'm going to come to you next. I'm going to come to you next, Linda. I just want to clarify exactly what Gary's saying. Gary, we're going back to one of the first comments I made to you. Basically, you think that it is irresponsible of humans to have children because they inevitably are going to suffer.
Well, I think it's irresponsible to not have a very deep conversation about it first. I think that we should at least oblige people to show enough competence that they would show to drive a car or to do something else in society to conduct the biological experiment that is creating a new human being and creating a sentient being that is going to suffer potentially. Yes, it's a significant fact that it may, in fact, not appreciate being born.
Right, but you're not saying it shouldn't be born.
Well, if I personally could say it shouldn't be, yeah, that's right. I wouldn't let it happen.
Do you accept, because it seems to be inevitable, you accept that all life, not just human life, all life involves suffering? So
well, it's preposterously wasteful.
Let me finish, Gary, please. Your solution, your ideal solution, would be to end all life, because that is the one guaranteed way of ending suffering.
Yeah, so it's called antinatalism. People have written books about it. Yes, I think life is a zero. I think life is a zero-sum game.
I just wanted to clarify that. Let's move on to
I just want to go one sentence.
We're at the point where this reaches the facile. Let's start with a tautology that successful patterns propagate successfully. And if you want to actually promote antinatalism and not propagating genetics as the way that you think is the way forwards, then it's bloody obvious to a blind man that this is not a successful pattern. You don't need to know much about biology to realize that creatures that don't propagate become extinct.
We genetically inherit our philosophy, in other words. Okay, so a Christian has to be a Christian, a Muslim has to be a Muslim, a scientist has to be a scientist because we inherit philosophy.
What the fuck are you talking
Well,
about?
you just basically said we inherit philosophy.
No, I said successful patterns.
Successful patterns. Patterns of what? I have a philosophy. My father wasn't an antinatalist. My mother was not an antinatalist. Okay, my entire family is not antinatalist. I obviously have not followed some genetic pattern in being an antinatalist. No, I followed an intellectual pattern.
Let me ask you this, Gary.
Can I
How
take
many
this?
societies
One at
in
a
the world?
time. We'll go
How
to
many
Thunder
societies
first,
in
and
the
then we'll come
world?
to Aaron.
How many societies in the world promote antinatalism?
Do I care? Is it a popularity contest? I'm making a logical argument. I'm not making the argument from popularity. Oh, okay, how many people are Christian? How many people are Muslim?
Time, please, Gary. Gary, you've had ample opportunity to put forward your case. Let Thunder respond.
The same reason that you don't find societies that have antinatalism is the same reason that you don't have societies that like to put their heads in blood.
Right. That's why we have a cutthroat capitalism, is because that's the right way to go, because it's going to be the most probable. Okay, is the fact that using and abusing and raping is a successful strategy in the long run, so that's why we'll have more of it. More exploitation, because human beings can never be anything but their biology. They can never be anything but what they're born to. I mean, I think that's a ludicrous, facile argument.
Yeah, okay, Gary, I think we've got the point. We're going to go to Aaron next.
Okay, now maybe I'm just a rarity in that maybe I'm just a product of exceptionally good genetics or something. But I mean, I'm almost 50 years old, and I still haven't. I still don't need glasses. I still feel good every day, all day long, right? I mean, I enjoy life. I have always enjoyed life. I've never had a whole lot of money, but I've always had a really good time. I have enjoyed every aspect of my life. My children enjoy being alive. This is one of those things that procreates. Okay, the feeling that we get when I am helping somebody is infinitely better than when I have screwed somebody over. When I screw somebody over, I feel completely shitty about it, and I stop doing it. These are natural things. I don't understand why there should be a criminality, as you put it, in having children. Now, giving value to that which is rare. I understand that this is a human tendency, and that maybe we shouldn't have quite so many children if we can't take care of them properly. Maybe we should only have children or pets or whatever that we can take care of properly and nurture and encourage and promote something better. This is where I feel. I mean, I agreed with your initial statement, but I think on every other level, you and I are going to be discordant.
Well, yeah, it's a progressive argument. It's a progressive argument, so you can start with just caring about things, and that's just fine with me. Any sentient you care for is a positive thing. I'm just saying the end game logic is the visualization of the game, the chessboard, the every organism with its teeth that are made for chomping, the attrition rate of the young. And the bottom line is I could make the same. I could just say Fukushima worked for 40 years wonderfully. Okay? So, yeah, you can't count that one time everything went wrong. So it's really nice for you to say you're happy and your kids are happy. Well, I'm not happy, okay? I'd like to go back in time and punch my mother in the vagina so I could be aborted, because I think this place is disgusting. I think the human race is disgusting. I think the whole fucking carnage mechanism is disgusting. It's vile. It's grotesque. 10 lion cubs for every one lion that gets to maturity. I mean, the attrition is obscene and disgusting, all right? I find it insufferable every day of my life. So fine, I'm the Fukushima. So what I'm asking you to do is balance that equation. All right? You justify to me why you have a right to say, I feel good about it, so I'm going to invest in it. But you're investing, I'm the one you're going to pull the straw for. I'm the one that gets stuck with the straw.
Okay, we're going to go to concordance, guys. Oh, and just before I do come to you, concordance, it looks as if we're being featured, so if you are watching us from outside, so to speak, do come and join us. You're watching the Magic Sandwich Show, a live call-in show where pretty much any topics are discussed. So do come and join us. Concordance.
I think this is the inevitable conclusion that you come to if you have an ultimately reductionist viewpoint. If you break everything down to the molecules and the genes, then you're missing part of the picture. You're focusing on the fact that the painting is just a bunch of paint, right? There's more to it than just the suffering. The pattern itself is interesting. The pattern itself is ultimately creative, Gary. We're ultimately creating.
Well, tell that to Freud.
Gary, you will be allowed an opportunity to respond. Please let concordance finish.
If you boil all of society down to this guy killed that guy, if you boil all of art down to, people making pretty pictures, if you boil it all down, you strip away what actually is meaningful about the scenario. And that is all of the emergent properties of these little tiny bits. Each of the little tiny bits is by itself not terribly interesting. If you look at the Olympics, you say, every year some guy wins, every guy's, 20 people lose. 400 people are left at home thinking they could have done it. But the exceptionalism of those gold medal winners, the striving through suffering is something that I personally can admire, even if I'm not the person taking the Nobel Prize. I'm not the person winning the gold medal. I can admire the striving towards, even if I'm not part of the successful cadre of truly elite that are ultimately going to grasp that ultimate utility, that ultimate reward.
You're just basically explaining to me why you like big breasts. You're not making a rational argument for why life succeeds. You're just basically saying that my heroin, when I get off on my heroin, it's really super cool. It's such a great experience that it's worth 1,000,000 dead cats. It's worth 1,000,000 this or 1,000,000. I'll write it all off because my glory moment is so spectacular. And I'm just going to argue I see none of that. I see no potential in that, okay? I'm not a person that hasn't indulged.
Okay, great. I think we've reached the impasse of irreconcilable differences, Gary. If you really don't want to if you really don't think that society's promoting themselves as a good thing, I wish you good luck with it, okay?
But what does that mean? Okay, fine. You're somehow saying I don't even get what William Lane Craig would get, which would be an argument. Would you say that to William Lane Craig? We just disagree. Let's not talk anymore. No, you wouldn't. So why are you doing it to me? Why are you discounting me like that?
Gary, one moment. I think the reason is because I don't see that there's any middle ground. You've obviously thought about this. You're obviously very compassionate about your beliefs, and the arguments that you're hearing, obviously, you're not accepting, and the arguments you're giving out are obviously not being accepted. So I don't see there's much middle ground. That's why I don't think there's much progress that can be made.
Okay, well, fine. I just wish you'd say that about them. Why do you bother arguing with religious people then? Because to me, you just made this hugest cop out. I can't even. This'll be the magic cop out moment in my YouTube history. I can't believe this. You will argue with creationists, and you won't argue with me. Amazing, amazing, amazing.
Well, Owen, if you want to comment, Gary, a moment, please. Owen wants to comment.
Sure. We were talking today about a project where in Russia they did this test where they were breeding foxes to try to find more domesticated foxes and just selecting for the more friendly of the foxes. And what they got is a genetic link to that. Is that the more docile the foxes became, they also showed other traits that you get when you derive dogs from wolves. You get curly tails and strange color patterns and things like that. And I thought, well, why do we do experiments of this sort? Why don't we try ever to do an experiment wherein we just promote intelligence? Like, get a whole bunch of raccoons together, and then let's breed them for intelligence, run them through a little intelligence test, and then see if we can actually promote the intelligence of another species, significantly. And the reason that I would like to do something like this is because the pointlessness that he was talking about before, I see from the entirely different spectrum. I imagine all of these sunrises and sunsets for the millions of years that we've had vertebrates walking around looking at the sky and not appreciating the beauty of that scene. I mean, think about it. When you talk about the meaning of life, and you think about how many millions of years, hundreds of millions of years, you've had beautiful colors and beautiful patterns and beautiful textures on all these animals, and there's nothing with the ability to appreciate, to sit back and say, wow, that looks absolutely fabulous.
I can pause you there because I don't think your argument is being persuading Gary at all. Gary, I'm going to give you the last word, and then I'm going to move on to the next caller.
Yeah.
The last word.
Well, fine enough, but yeah, that's all subjective bibble babble. We can make people happy. We can give people through chemistry, through even electricity. We could give them glory moments. We could give them all this stoic, proud, I'm the greatest gladiator in the world. We could give everybody the illusion of being superheroes, of being supermen, all this stuff, and that's all that is, okay? You're just talking about gratifying, simplistic, biological needs, and you're sitting there and making it a stoic Sisyphus, I'm pushing the magic boulder up the magic hill of purpose. And no, okay, the fact is there's no purpose.
We've got people stacked up now. Thank you very much for your call.
Cop out. Man, what fucking pussies!